I mean, we had the factory industries where we see that, there were factory towns and whole towns were built on factories. So they knew that they were going to have a certain population, which meant the brick and mortar stores knew that they were going to have a certain amount of business. And when the factory left, so did the business. And a lot of those towns ended up suffering and they never really recovered from it. So we've seen history tell us about these things, and history does repeat itself. It's also something where I appreciate the pushback because I'm speaking from I've been looking at some of these things that I work on for like 40 years. So I can sit on my perch and say like, oh, for me, I'm going to be fine, but I also have less time than more time. So that's one of the reasons why I appreciate AI, because knowing that I'm not going to have probably another 50 years, I have to be more efficient with the time that I have. I want to know that I'm doing everything that I can with the time that I have in a way that makes me comfortable. So I'm more about my peace than I am about chasing the money and some of these other things. So it's definitely going to end up replacing people like teachers. When you said that, my mind went to the teachers that I used to have as substitutes. And I knew when I was talking to a teacher that probably read as much of the assignment as I did, and I might have read more. When I go to ask a question and they flip to the back of the textbooks where the textbooks have answers, I can tell you, I remember being in high school and I think it was high school, where, we were just bad kids. You know what I mean? Like we were smart, but so smart that we were dangerous to the people that weren't that way. So I remember us taking like the teacher's guide to the teacher's guide textbook so that they had to actually answer our questions. Because you're sitting there talking to us about how smart we are and how come you don't know the answer to this? Okay, well, why don't we take that book from you and see if you can answer the same questions that you're asking us? And watching them stumble, oh, I mean, dude, it was like for a good week or two, it was glorious. But like, that was me knowing enough to be trouble. And I feel like AI in its own way is knowing enough to be trouble. And you have to make those pivots, you have to make the shift. So I can definitely see teachers being something where they start to phase it out, because we already see with the education system, those are people that spend as much time with our kids as we do. So for me, I think it's incredibly dangerous, because what I remember is I can remember Miss McKinley. I can remember Mr. Cassidy. I can remember the teachers that I had a real relationship with, as opposed to the ones that just kind of spouted off, these are the things that you're supposed to know. So those people stood out to me, and they're part of the experiences where, like, if I'm talking about strategy, these people taught me certain lessons in life. Sometimes when I go to give people a strategy or a tactic, I can't tell them where I got it from, because some of the places I got it from aren't places, it's not my story to tell, or it's not the legal way, or some of these other things where I got the information, I got it. And then I took that information and turned it into something that would be useful to somebody else. AI in its own way is doing that. But for us, if I still feel like, at least from my point, because I'm always thinking more strategic, I always feel like I'm going to have that to rely on. But I have the luxury of thinking that way for a long period of time. I love that you pointed out that trades may end up taking back off again, because those are things that you can't necessarily replace. And then it puts you in a position where maybe they start paying more of a premium for that because they're saving on all those other things. One of the things that I loved when we first met and we were talking about how you were expanding your business and how you were looking at things, you weren't just hiring, you were looking at fair wages. You were trying to make sure that you were putting people in great positions to be able to make sure that it wasn't just you helping yourself, it was you helping them as well. So if we have more people that think like that, then I think we're going to be in a good place. But if it's just about the bottom line and the dollar, then yeah, there are going to be people that end up getting hurt.
Yeah,
But
well,
for the conscious people, I think it would be different.
for the vast majority, it's going to be about the bottom line. I think that, the people who, how many companies can you think of that are actually considered to be both public and, like on a moral high ground that you can't really argue against? And the only one I can think of is Costco, right? One company. And maybe they're not even, right? But like, that's who I could think of that seems to have like a high, like revenue per employee, but has like very low turnover, few hours per week, gets you insurance and things like that. Like they seem like the only company that does it. It's one company, right? Or there's probably more than that I don't know about, but
That's the one that's standing out right now. Yeah.
the point is that, and Jason Cohen always used to say this, the founder at WPNG used to say, in a capitalist society, the goal is to acquire capital. And he didn't mean that in a negative sense. He was just saying, don't forget that that is the goal. And although you might put other things at the same level as capital, not everyone else will. And you got to remember that you have to compete against the ones that don't give a shit. And so that becomes a detriment to your own business, because doing the right thing could make you, less competitive in some way. So I don't really think that AI actually does anything morally positive. I think it's in the other way. It's the other sense is that like regulation probably is going to be required, but to the sense that's like the reason why I don't think it's going to help is that there won't be employees. Like one of the things we started the conversation, not started, but in the early part of this conversation was, AI provides an opportunity for one person entrepreneurs to do what maybe took 5 people. There's a downside to that. That means that those 4 other people will never get hired. So the things that I'm doing because of legacy. But if I were to start all over again, I wouldn't hire people just to have humans around, right? And I think that that's an important thing to really keep in mind, is that, like, if all of a sudden you can, so here's the thing, like the $1 million solopreneur, it's always been sort of fictitious. People have always talked about it, but what they didn't really talk about is that W-2 employee. But I had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
1099
Mm-hmm.
contractors, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
employees, so I'm going to call myself a one-man,
Mm-hmm.
7-figure shop. I've never actually met anyone who had no help and made 7 figures, right?
Self-made men, yes.
But not even self-made. I've never met a self-made person, period. But like, as far as I know, everyone had somebody to forget and
Mm-hmm.
say that. But for this particular thing, like, I don't know anyway. They exist, right? They exist. But I think that, like, the idea of a one person business that can, get to $1 million in revenue on very little like overhead and no other actual contractors. So I'm not talking about like having somebody do your books. I'm not talking. They're actually doing work that you're building for, is what I mean, right? So like, that is very, very real. I think. I think that is on the rise. And I know that there are people who are doing it, but I mean, like, where many companies are doing this. Like, you go into a co-working space and half of them are doing that. Like, I think that is the evolution of what these tools are doing, which means that fewer people are going to have jobs, which means that more people are going to have to be entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
right? Which is not it's like saying everyone that, imagine all of a sudden you had to be a teacher. Well, I could never do that. I could never, so like, not everyone has the DNA to be an entrepreneur. So what happens? And that's the thing that I don't know. Like, I don't think anyone is talking about, because it hasn't been a major issue yet. But think about like the layoffs from all the FANG companies, right?
Mm.
Like, it was like, I forget who started it, but then one after another, they all let people go. They're never rehiring. They're never rehiring those engineers, right? Whether or not they let them go for the reasons they said they let them go, because I don't know really what the terms of
Mm-hmm.
that were, but like, they will have basically one engineer for every 6 agents, or or every
Right.
9, so 1 in 10, or 1 for 10, or something like that. But like, that's never getting rebuilt. All the new companies are never going to have staff that they would otherwise require to scale. So like, I think that knowing this is like, there's no like moral to this story. I'm just saying that if this is actually a possibility, how are you prepared for it? Because you don't have a choice. Like, you either are on the upside of that or the downside of it. And unfortunately, if it's like one person for every 9 machines, you're more likely to be on the downside of that, right? The negative side of that. And so if you're a business today, how do you, because I might still be on the downside of it too, but at least I'm like trying to focus on how I'm not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not even thinking about these things, then, I don't know how you really plan to survive the long term, upheaval that this is going to cause, if it hasn't already caused it.